My name is Soumya Balasubramanya. I'm a senior economist and I'm currently working with the World Bank. But for many years I worked for the CGIAR and I work on issues at the nexus of environment, poverty, agriculture, sustainability, and I try to understand things that work and things that don't work and what might be able to do through policy in order to reduce poverty and have more inclusive growth. This paper came about, sort of the genesis of this paper is in many conversations that I had with many people, many of whom are co-authors on this piece, including folks from the Water for Food Institute. And it's around solar irrigation and the advantages and perhaps some of the limitations of solar irrigation. And there's a lot of excitement about these solar pumps, especially in low and middle income countries in Asia and Africa. And that's because there is still a need to expand the use of energy in agriculture, and countries are very keen to do it in a way that is not fossil fuel dependent. This paper looks at what are some of the advantages and opportunities and what are some of the risks of doing so. Solar energy has the potential to be to generate great benefits, especially to reduce poverty. At the moment, solar technologies, even though they're cheaper than what they used to be, are still quite expensive. So perhaps small and marginal farmers in Asia and Africa may not be able to afford to purchase pumps themselves. So part of the challenge, the policy challenge, is how do we extend the benefits of these pumps to these people who may not be able to afford purchasing these themselves or privately owning them, and so what might be some of the business models and arrangements that might be put into place in order to supply irrigation services to these people that does not depend upon necessarily them owning the pump themselves. The other piece of it is around mitigation. Because solar energy is a renewable source of energy, there's a lot of hope that it could be part of low and middle income countries' strategies towards reducing emissions. And there, the potential for solar pumps to do so is not quite clear and may not perhaps be as large as is hoped. And part of the reason is that very often these pumps, especially in South Asia, get deployed in a context where farmers are using less energy than they actually would like to. So they're dependent usually on pumps that run on diesel or petrol, which are very expensive. And then when they gain access to the pump, it's not necessary that they may stop using the fuel pump. Very often what we see is that both pumps are used together, with some shift in intensity of use between these two pumps. But it isn't the case that the fossil fuel pump's use goes to zero. Similarly, very often, if water and energy have been a constraint in the production process, having access to a pump where there are no costs of pumping, because there are no costs to running a pump on solar technologies, essentially means that farmers can put more land under cultivation. So they end up expanding the area that they irrigate. Very often they end up changing a crop that is often more water intensive. So if one were to think about pegging carbon credits to solar irrigation programs, one would have to think about methodologies that are able to account for so many different margins of adjustments. And in a setting, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa or in South Asia, where there are millions of farmers cultivating very small pieces of land, accounting for this kind of adjustments at scale in order to credibly calculate carbon credits is very hard. One needs to be a little careful moving into the future on how we capitalize on the opportunities while we manage some of the risks. One of the known challenges of solar irrigation is that it will lead to more extraction of groundwater, because that is the point. The point is to provide energy to farmers so that they may be able to extract water. So in areas, particularly in South Asia, where groundwater levels are already falling and aquifers are at risk, and where solar irrigation is expanding quite aggressively, this is a risk that needs to be managed. And one may want to think about other kinds of policy approaches, including putting limits on the expansion of cultivated land, or putting limits on the kind of crop choices that farmers could shift to in order to be able to manage some of these risks as well. Or thinking about selling small pumps that are not powerful enough to extract large volumes of water. So these may be some of the very practical things that one has to think of when solar irrigation is expanding, especially in contexts where groundwater is already at risk.